This is the Convene podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk. My name is Maggie, Digital Media Editor. As we're recording this at the end of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, I really wanted us to have a discussion on the topic. That's why I chose an article from Travel Daily News titled New Research Highlights Toll of Business Travel on Mental Health and a Need for More Support from Employers. The article focuses on a survey conducted by Pcma and commissioned by World Travel Protection of North American business travelers, which the author says reveals that for many, work-related travel is taking a toll on their mental health, leading to anxiety, stress, and exhaustion. I feel we all have experienced that when we have to travel for work. It doesn't mean that we don't look at emails or move tasks forward or take calls. We try to do it all. And that's what the article highlighted too, right? The anxiety, stress, and exhaustion are common. And especially that women are more stressed while men are more lonely. And that part of women being more stressed reminded me immediately of the article Michelle wrote about Caroline Punt, which will appear in the May-June issue, and Punt's recollection of the sacrifices she had to make while traveling and having young kids at home, and how much truly hasn't changed for decades in the industry. The author also quotes Dr. Joel Lockwood, Regional Chief Medical Officer Americas at World Travel Protection, who stresses the importance of supporting employees during business trips. He says that allowing for pre-travel workload discussion and giving employees opportunities to take a break during travel where possible are also crucial. Organizations that make an effort to focus on their employees' well-being while traveling maximize the benefits of business travel for both the employee and the company. So I wonder, what else did you guys see in this article that stood out to you?
This is Barbara Palmer, Deputy Editor. One of the things that stood out to me is, and when you talk about things not changing, is just that women were more stressed. And so, the burden of figuring out what to do while you're gone, I think does fall still largely on women. And that's something that really surfaced in the new report that the Pcma Foundation and Business Events Sydney have just released. And among their recommendations were to support parents while they were traveling. And since that's focused on events, a lot of the recommendations were geared around not just supporting parents who travel without their children, but supporting a way for parents to travel with their children. And chief among those recommendations were to have childcare available at events, which I think that that's really something that when it's offered, people really are happy about it. And it seems like it does relieve a lot of the stress and makes it possible. I think that we're a long way from that being in every environment, that being something that is embraced. I can imagine it really depends on the industry and the companies. But I would love it if instead of it being, here's how we support women, if it was wider than that, here's how we support families. And so whether you're, whatever responsibility you have at home, to think about how you can support that when people are traveling. I do think that the way that you support people when you travel is probably goes along in how you support people when they're not traveling. And so just good practices, thinking of, empathy for professionals' whole lives would make a big difference. What do the rest of you think?
Well, I am always interested in what stories like this this is Curt, by the way, digital editor, of the sort of other end of it. Here's here's the issue and here's how we can solve the problem. So I did a little search and I was looking to see if I could find anything about supporting employees while they're traveling, right? Or what businesses can do to relieve stress of employees while they're traveling. Didn't find a whole lot. I found a whole lot of stuff of what the employees can do for themselves to relieve stress while they're traveling. But I didn't find a lot of what the employers can do, except I did find one story and it has just, encourage employees to take breaks, which I think in this situation would be a little hard to do if you're going to something for 2 days of meetings. You probably have a full schedule of meetings, and even your not meetings are FaceTime with people and they're just basically meetings, but they're just not in a meeting room, like dinner or drinks or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's always very you're performing or you're working or whatever. But the things that I liked in here was provide support for social connection, like talked about how the men feel lonely, or women are away from the family or whatever. If there's a way to build in social time, like FaceTime calls and stuff like that, and like maybe the employers help set up their schedule or something like that. And then the other things were just like post and encourage employees to talk about their experiences. This can help them process their emotions and feel less isolated. Be understanding and supportive. I don't know that these things are really going to relieve stress while it's happening, but they might be helpful after, I guess. And offer employees resources and support. This includes providing them with the access to mental health professionals, employee assistance programs, and other resources. I mean, it's all kind of not in the moment, it seems like, although those could be, I guess, if they're having stress in the moment, maybe you're providing them with a way to call. And then a lot of it was like pre-event planning or pre-travel planning. So I guess there are some ways, but I think it's a really tough thing for even employers to figure out. I mean, unless you just encourage your employees, here's what you can do. And you offer maybe employers need to have an action plan or something that they give to people that they send off on trips and say, these are the things, and you're not going to get in trouble for, taking an hour in your hotel room and, screaming in your pillow or whatever it is you have to do. Anyway, so that's the stuff that I found, which I thought might be helpful. Jen, world traveler who just returned home.
Yeah, lots of thoughts on this. It's such a hard one to talk about because I feel like everyone's version of business travel is a little bit different and what they're willing to deal with and how, I think for some people, I'm not a mom. I don't have kids. I just have a fur baby. But I have a lot of mom friends with young kids, and I know that some of them really look forward to the time that they can travel for work, and they're very excited for that break. While others it is more difficult. And of course, it's so individual, it's so personal. But I feel like what's universal is when you're traveling for work and the amount of time that you're expected to show up and be on, it is supremely exhausting. And I'm an extrovert. I'm a social person. I recharge my batteries by being around people. I love my job. I love working. I love traveling. So if I need that, I know that other people will do too. So I feel like like you said, Curt, like hit it on the spot, which was giving people time and space to do what they need to do and decompress and handle whatever they need to handle. I mean, I think of all the press trips that I've taken in my career, and the amount of free time that I've gotten on a lot of those press trips has been minimal to none. And it's actually become now to a point, and I can actually think of examples where me and other people I know have gotten in trouble for trying to take a little bit of free time, whether we didn't feel well or just needed it to do whatever we needed to do. And I think that's really inappropriate, like in this day and age, when we're talking about mental health and everything that we have on our plate. So I think now I've kind of instituted my own policy where I tell them what I need. And that if I, need extra time, whatever that is, within reason, then I voice it. And if they're not open or okay with that, then, either I don't take the trip or I just tell them that it's not negotiable. I know not everyone can do that, but I think that we just need to be more firm about what our needs are, because at the end of the day, like, our time is our time. And I think that there's probably not a whole lot of good reasons for not giving that. You know what I mean? I think if you're out on work and you're giving a presentation, like, if it's something specific like that, but if you're traveling for work and the itinerary is a little bit loose, like, that time can be built in. Like, I don't really care what anyone says. So, but that's just me. I think, I mean, I'm the same way when I travel personally too. I don't think that, like, I'm not a person who has to hit every single last site on the list. Like, I think building in free time and time to decompress is super, super important, regardless of the reason why you're traveling. Because if not, you're just going to get sick and make yourself go crazy.
And I think the key is that the companies have to recognize it and allow it, and give that
Yeah.
permission, and say, we understand this, because I think a lot of people don't even realize or aren't in the situation you are in, where you can say, I got to do this, or I'm going to
Mhm.
not do my job correctly. Barbara?
Jen, I was just thinking about you're so right, Curt. But when Jen was talking, my mind was going back to like travel that I've done where the organizer of the itineraries have intentionally built in space and let us know, that space. And then, like, when I thought about that, my physical body relaxed and was like, it felt something good remembering how that felt. I know that that's not possible really when you're doing an event, that it might
Mhm.
just be like, you know, 6 to 10 for 3 days, but wherever you can find that. And if it's just, the intention that there be some respite, I think the benefits to the person offering that are so big because you just feel grateful really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I
And
feel
it's
like it's rare to see it though in a lot of fam trip itineraries, or if it is, it's minimal. It's like an hour, and they always end up cutting into it because they go over on the schedule, they overplan. But I agree with you. When there's been intentional, like at least 2 hours of space during the day, not like, oh, after we get back at 11 o'clock at night when everyone drops dead immediately. You know what I mean? Like, when it's actually intentional during the day or in the morning, even in the morning, that's really nice. But yeah, I think the smart ones know, they can do that, but it's not always the case, sadly.
Yeah, having that space too, don't you feel, Barbara, that it gives you like whatever 15 minutes to think about what you experienced a little bit more, and it helps you sort of retain, and whether you take more notes while you're in that 15 minutes or not, even if you're just sitting there having a tea or something, you sort of reflect on what you've already experienced, and it's only going to help you in the job afterward, right?
Right.
So I think it's really smart to build those times in.
It's funny when in the event program, there is building white space, for exactly such moments of decompression. But then they compete with something like a session or something that's actually interesting. So you are again put in a position to choose, and again having the expectations of from your employer that you should be doing work. You're often not going to opt for the white space and for the downtime. You're going to push yourself and do yet another thing, which I don't think is also fair. Or when you plan for white space in the program, just make it only that. Don't make people choose.
Yep.
For some reason, this conversation has made me think of that during the lockdown. I don't know if anyone remembers that journalist whose child came into the room while he was broadcasting, and he
Yes.
was so embarrassed. And I just feel like that broke the fourth wall or something, that like we're all pretending Like we don't have these other, that we don't have these needs to think, that we don't have any, you know, limits, that we don't have other competing responsibilities. One of the things that I think has become really more mainstream at events is having spaces for people to work, and that recognition that when people come to convening leaders, they probably can't just put an out of office note and not look back. That they probably have some projects they're in the middle of, and they have some things that are. So when they build these spaces at the event where people can go and work, I think that that's a signal too that we like we're all figuring this out, but it's not just this event is the only thing that's happening.
Casey, anything that maybe stood out to you from the article?
I just think work travel in general is a unique kind of exhausting. It's physically much more demanding than our everyday work, and it's mentally taxing because you're meeting all different people and going all new places and maybe needing to navigate new spaces on your own. And so just as you guys have been saying, I think having built-in breaks that are truly meant as breaks either to decompress or to catch up on the work that you still have to do at home is really crucial because, as Jen said, when you get back at the end of the day, whether it's meeting or a press trip or, a site visit, you're exhausted. You're not going back to your hotel and thinking about checking your emails. So having that built-in space during the day while you're still fresh and can really focus on what you need to do is really, really crucial.
And everybody should have a day of rest after a trip.
They should, or a day. I liked the idea in the article. People said they were building in a day to just go sightsee or to enjoy their time where they're visiting. And I think that's very healthy. I think that kind of restores some work-life balance if you're able to either enjoy where you just were or maybe just have time when you get home to unpack and kind of reset before you start work up again.
One thing that I remember from past surveys is how much the respondents to our surveys liked the travel part of their jobs. They found it to be like a benefit. And I'm also an extrovert, and I love to meet new people, new ideas, new places. And to think that you can do that at like not a killing pace is just really, really attractive and positive.
And Barbara, that you bring up an interesting point too. It depends very much on your personality, how you handle work travel, because if you're an introvert, your battery is way past dead by the time you're done at the end of the
Right.
day because you've had to be on all day. So that requires even more of, time to decompress and kind of be alone and have some quiet time, which is really needed to be able to carry on the next day and do it all over again.
And also flying very far, right? Because that adds an extra layer of how, like, where are you starting from? If you've traveled for 20, 30 hours to get to a destination, and then the next day or that same day, you have to be already on and do work-related stuff, even if it's going for a dinner with colleagues. It's exhausting. It's really
Yeah. If I'm traveling really just a broad, like 8+ hour flights, I get there the day before. And if my costs are being paid for, by someone other than myself or my company, and they don't want to pay for it, I'll pay for it myself because it's like $100 hotel. You know what I mean? It's worth that to just be able to get back onto my sleep pattern. Even if you're flying business, like good sleep is not guaranteed. Like I think on all my flights, I even in the best business class, and it's like 10 plus hours, I'm still, just grabbing sleep where I can, cobbling together a couple of hours. Like you just need that day to reset. And it's so worth it. And I've started building that into all of my trips
I
at the beginning or after, and I will not negotiate on that.
I concur completely. I started doing that as well, and same policy. If they were amenable and would, and many people suggested it themselves, like you're coming a far way, we'll fly, here's when you arrive. I also would just get a hotel and stay because, I've also been on trips where I it hasn't been hard for me. It's been maybe, an easy flight for me, but I'll see people that are coming in and joining the group after they've just gotten off a 16-hour flight.
Yeah.
And they are they're not functional.
No,
They're
they're
like
miserable.
they're not functioning, and I don't know why it takes us so I don't know why that's so hard to understand.
And
Yeah.
I remember taking a trip a few years ago. It was within the US and it wasn't a long flight, but my flight was delayed and we had something planned for that evening when we were all getting in. There was a little welcome reception and maybe we were doing something after dinner. And I was so stressed out about it because you don't really want to miss those initial introductions with the people you're doing business with and the people you're on the trip with. And that was through no fault of my own, but it just added this extra stress that wasn't necessary.
But the fact that Jen and Barbara, you both mentioned you're ready to take on, like to bear the cost of an extra night or, traveling more comfortably. I think it goes back to the article and having this understanding from your employer and having this conversation initiated by the employer saying, I see you're going to have a long trip. And I know there are companies in different sectors where they have these policies that if the flight is over, 8 hours, they cover business for you and then an extra night. So they have these policies built in, but I don't think that's very common for the events industry. So it's kind of more, there's no budget for that usually. But I think it should be more normalized that the employer initiates that conversation and is the first one to start the conversation and say, I see you, I see what you're going to go through physically and mentally. I'm ready to help you and support you in that, even if it's with an extra night, because it's not going to cost the company that much.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes, and also if you are 6'6" and you need extra leg room, so you might
Oh
have
my
to
God.
pay for a better seat or a seat with more leg room.
Bless your heart, Curt. I cannot even imagine. I just don't understand why they don't make areas that fit people who don't fit into the standard seat. Like, it
I
just boggles my
agree.
mind.
I agree. I often think about that when I see really tall people, and I'm not ridiculously tall, but I'm uncomfortable as these seats have gotten smaller and like less room between them. I feel it. And I'm just like, why shouldn't a certain height just automatically go to the exit row? Like
Yeah.
if an airline had that policy of like, if you're over this height, you get accommodated. It would just be like, we don't say God. We don't like to see that either. It
Yeah.
just looks horrible.
Yeah. I've had so many thoughts on how planes should be reconfigured after this last trip, after 11 flights.
That's
I've thought about boarding by height.
Family sections, quiet zones, areas for tall people or people who just don't fit in the standard seat, which is pretty much everyone.
to swing us back to this story. Maybe all companies should have private jets for their employees to travel.
I love that idea.
Just thinking about this is just thinking about how relatively recently in our history business travel has been a thing.
That's so true.
It's free. Yeah, there's so many questions about it.
Why is it called business, for example, when You rarely fly business on a business trip.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I feel like whenever I'm in business, it is not on a business trip.
It's because
And
you
I
booked it.
feel like when I'm in it, it's like I see a couple people like who are obviously traveling on business, but not always.
Yeah. I do think that, when you're somebody who travels all the time, you definitely get to that more elite status where you're always upgraded or
Mhm.
it is one of those things where I think the higher you are in the hierarchy, the more likely you are to encounter frictionless travel, that you don't encounter the bumps and bruises of coach. It'd be great to just, it's hard to empathize maybe if you don't have that experience of getting off a 12-hour flight when your knees have been up to your chin and the person in front of you is reclined all the way. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for the conversation, bringing some good suggestions to event planners and their organizations. I hope they'll listen to us and buy private jets for their employees. I think this part was spot on. And for our listeners that got to this point in the conversation, remember to subscribe, like the podcast, share it with your friends and colleagues. And you can find links in the show notes of all the articles we've mentioned. And until next time.